Hi, I'm Justin. This is C5 Dev, where inspiration is a chain reaction. In this video, I'm going to show the attempts that I took to create a series of monster art images based on the family of monsters called Behemoth in the Final Fantasy series. Some of the images that I'm going to create during this are going to be a little bit scary because the Behemoth is kind of a big, ferocious monster, so do prepare yourself for that if you're scared easily. This video is going to be a little bit more advanced than my previous video, and I'm also going to go over some of the features of Scenario GG a little bit faster and not explain them. So if you're new to prompt generation or Scenario GG, I do recommend that you check out that video and then come back to this one. Now with that said, let's take a look at Scenario GG where I attempt to create the Behemoth. At Scenario GG, I'm in the Generate Images section, and I'm in the public generators, and here's the list of all the generators that I created in attempting this Behemoth creation. I'm actually going to start in public generators and show you the first steps that I took to create this first generator. Go to public generators, and then we'll go over to stable diffusion. All right, in this generator, I'm going to start with Behemoth and Final Fantasy style. Enter that, and I want sampling steps to be 75, perfect. And then let's generate the images. All right, with those generated, I think I want to add a few more things. So it seems to be a little bit low quality. So I'm going to add in high resolution and high quality. And then I think I want to add that they seem to be two-legged, so I want to add quadruped, as that is four-leg. We can spell it. There we go. And then down here, also want to make sure in the advanced section that I remove low quality and low resolution. And then I'll run that. All right, that's looking a little bit closer to what I want. And then, let's see, I want to add, I do like that this is kind of more 3D, and so those are pretty good. I'm going to add 3D render to make sure I get more of that. I think I want to do 4K to add even higher quality or higher fidelity to those images. And then I'll add detailed. Then down here on the negative prompt, I think I want to try to remove and try to make sure that they're in frame, so out of frame. And yeah, I think that's it for now. Enter that, and I'll generate those images, see what we get. All right, and then, so this is heading kind of in the direction I want, but there's a few things I want to pull out, so I'm actually gonna copy in a whole list of negative prompts that I used through the creation of this first set. So again, these are CSV, and so I can just enter that in and then run that. And I'm going to run a couple of these just so we get some example results. Okay, and then looking at that, this one is getting pretty close. That's sort of in the direction that I want to run. And so this is the exact setup that I used to generate the first generator. And what I did was I would just create many of these. If I were to count, I would say I probably ran about 100 or so images. And then I collected the best ones that I wanted out of that. So I just went in, for example, if I thought this was a good one, or actually this one was pretty good, I would just click on that image and then go to the download and download that to my computer. And then that'll prepare for the next step. And I may have rushed over the negative prompt, so I just want to make sure that I grab that screen again, just so you can see that. So if you want to enter some of these on your own, you are welcome to. I'm going to go back to the generate images. And this is the first generator that I created. Clear out those images. And I'll just run 3 of these. All right, with that generated, you can see there are some of these that have a little bit of the shape that I'm looking for as I'm working towards my Behemoth. And What I did was, after creating this generator, I went through and created maybe 100 or so images from here and then selected the best ones that I wanted. Let's take a look at what images I used for this generator. I go up to generators. Okay. Go to Behemoth V1. So here is the list of images that I selected using the prompt that I showed before from the Stable Diffusion generator. And you can see also that these don't have backgrounds. So I actually used the Scenario GG training tool to remove that. And I'll do a quick example of that to show you how I did that. I'm going to go to create a generator. From here, I'm going to give it the name, Behemoth V1. I will click on the Add Images button and select images that I downloaded to my computer earlier. Upon selecting those images, I'm just going to accept all because they're all square. With those now loaded, if you hover over, there'll be this Remove Background button. Click on that and say yes. The image has moved, and I'm sure that's just because the tool is in alpha and they're still working on it. But the image is over here, and you can see the background is nicely removed. So I just went through and I did that for each of these. And you can see right here, it works really nicely. Even this one, which is pretty complicated, I think it'll do a pretty good job removing that. There we go, perfect. So if some of those backgrounds may get included into some of your data sets, you may want to look at that. You're not going to need to do this for all images, such as these images already really kind of don't have a background. But this one, let's say this tree really starts to show up in your images that you're generating and you don't want that, then we'll just make sure that we remove that there. And there you go, nicely cropped out. So then I went through, clicked next, chose auto, next. From here, I chose characters, NPCs, and mobs, and then chose crawling creatures. And then start training. With V1 created, I then created Behemoth V2 from the images that I generated and selected from there. Here you can see I also removed all the backgrounds, as I was getting used to that feature and just wanted to see how that worked as far as narrowing in on my subject. You can see I also have a pretty consistent style that I am narrowing in on. So let's take a look at some of the images that this will generate. I'm going to click generate 3 times to get 16 images for us to review. With that complete, you can see this is pretty consistent, except for this one up here. Not sure where that one came from, but a lot of these all kind of have a similar shape. Sometimes it's going to miss some things. So for instance here, this one only has 3 legs and most of them are going to have 4. This one actually has 5, so an extra leg. But pretty consistent styling. So I could then create a second step of this. After running this though, this didn't quite feel like what I was trying to target. So I then attempted to create an additional set from here, but as you can kind of see, these images are getting very dark here and I wasn't able to lighten that up. So I figured it would be best to actually start from the beginning and try to get a different set of data. And I figured maybe it was the fact that I was trying to go to 3D renders to start with, and I should have focused more on the styling that I was looking for and then worry about 3D rendering after that. All right, so for the second take of making that, I'm going to go to Generate Images. I'm going to go to the public generators and choose the Stable Diffusion generator again. I'm going to clear out our previous images from before. And with this one, I am going to enter in the following. I'm going to start with Final Fantasy Behemoth, and then quadruped. I'm going to copy in the negative prompts, but the other part I tried to get rid of is some of the different numbers of legs other than 4. With those in, also got to make sure on that stable diffusion generator, for me I found that 75 steps usually produces the best results. And then lastly, going to scroll down, and on this one I went with guidance all the way up to 20. So let's generate 3 sets of that and take a look at the results. That complete. We can see probably this one is starting to head in that direction, and there's a lot of spikiness. The Behemoth has spikes throughout its body, and especially depending on which Final Fantasy series it's probably referring to. Some were spikier than others, but has the horns, has the spikes. So I went through and ran, about 100 or so images of that, and then collected the ones that I thought were the best out of here, and created a new generator from that. So I'm going to go back to the generators. Inside the generators, then I created this one from that data set. Inside the generators, here is my Take-Two version 1. For this generator, I selected more images, and I tried to get a little bit more variation, but you can see a lot of them are pretty dark. Trying to get more of that darker theme into the image set. Except for this one, does add a little bit more gold. So with that one, I also chose auto and the same categories as before. And then let's just take a look at some of the images that this is going to generate. And I'll run 3 sets just like before. All right, with those generated, you can see this is definitely headed down a different path. That real level of spikiness has been carried through. And some of that muscular form of the Behemoth is also represented there. So from here, then I selected a few more that I liked, and the thought was if I grab some of this muscular form and the spikes, that then those would blend together, and I would be able to turn that into more of a 3D render later on. Now, one of the things I want to point out before we take a look at the other generator is you can see here some of the eyes are like red and glowing on almost every single one. And so one of the things that I did not pick up on as I was selecting from this set is that I was grabbing a bunch of eyes like that. So that means I'm going to get pretty much only that type of feature as I use those images. So just something to be aware of. Now, like I pointed out with the red eyes, what you're going to notice is as you work through creating your own generator and you select the training images for it, and sometimes it's going to find patterns that you didn't see there. So for instance, the red eyes, I didn't really notice that because that wasn't something I was looking for. I was looking for 4 legs and kind of a physique that was really kind of the characteristic that I wanted. And then it's only after I started running a few of those, I was like, why are all the eyes red? And then I realized my training set was kind of biased or leaning towards the red eyes. So just something to be aware of. It may take a few iterations for you to get comfortable with. All right, so then let's take a look at the generator that I created from selecting and downloading some of those to my machine. So at generators, here is the T2 version 2. So in Take-Two version 2, here are the images that I selected from that previous generator. If you want to take a look at these images, you can click on them and it gives you a much larger view, and you can cycle through them to kind of see. So for instance, those glowing eyes, something I did not take into account, or this red splash is showing up on quite a few. And so that is going to carry over into many of the images that I generate. Let's go to generate images and I'll run 3 sets of this. All right, from that, you can kind of see that this really started to head in a direction that I wasn't really wanting to go. Some of this distortion may be that I actually would have to put in a few more sampling steps to get a refinement. But as I tried to turn these into 3D renders by applying 3D render, I realized I wasn't getting the results that I wanted. So let's just take a look at one of these examples. All right, with that complete, you can see there really isn't too much of an effect like I thought there would be, not like what I was showing in the first iteration of that, where I was really getting more of that 3D. So that's where then I pivoted and I actually did a take 3 on going back, starting with the stable diffusion and trying to get a different kind of training set than before. I can go back to the Stable Diffusion generator to get images. Public generators. Clear out this. All right, with take 3, I'm just going to paste in the parameters that I used. And I set sampling steps to 75. Put in the negative prompt. And then I'll run 3 sets of that again, 75. 3 sets. All right, with that complete, I realized that I had forgotten to change one of the other settings that I did before. Again, I moved guidance all the way to 20 because I really wanted to lean heavily on these 3 components versus here, it's using the Behemoth, the quadruped concept art as a good hint in that direction, but it's not really emphasizing on the Behemoth. So that guidance up to 20 is going to help that a little bit. Starting to see some of those elements that I'm looking for. And again, on this one, the big change was kind of that concept art. I was hoping to create sort of the concept of the Behemoth first and then move that towards more of that 3D render. You can see even with this concept art, there's already a little bit of 3D to it. So I was hoping that that would pop out. This one is kind of close, but and see if I can find one that I would have picked for the first training set. All right, after running a few of those, I think I probably would have selected maybe this one and this one as my training images. You can see that some of the issue with this is that parts of the monster are cut off. So either the head or the backside. I'm probably going to favor the backside being cut off more than the head because that's a little bit more complete. But let's go over to the generator that I created from this and take a look. All right, with those, I created this one. Right now it says untitled, and that's because at the time that I was using this, the application wasn't saving the titles, so that's why that's there. But you can see here are ones that I created after that, and the title is again working. So this was the first one that I generated, so let's take a look. Here are some of those images that I selected. As you can see, pretty close to the ones that I was picking before. And I have quite a few examples. My hope here was that the generator was going to be able to use all these examples and kind of hone in on more of what I wanted versus what I was providing it. Again, a lot of these images are cut off in parts, and I was hoping that it would kind of understand the different pieces I want and see how that works. So with that, let's generate some images and take a look at the results. You can see before when I clicked on that generate images, you're able to just click on that and generate a whole bunch at one time. Now, depending on where Scenario GG goes with their pricing model, that may be something that you can use. Otherwise, you may want to be a little bit more conscious of that and only run one at a time, because if these cost you per run, it's going to go through your credits a lot faster. But again, depending on their model, it may be cheap enough that you can do that and just generate a whole bunch, so that way you can quickly look at the results. That said, I definitely think that I have more of a consistent theme with this approach. And some of the images are lighter, so you can actually see more of the detail. Some are still darker. So it depends on which ones I'm going to select from here that's going to start to lean the next generator in a certain direction. So I selected a subset of these after generating probably about another 100 or so images, and then created the second generator. Upon looking at this one, I realized that I actually deleted the second generator, and this was just another version of one that I was creating. So I'm going to actually delete this one because it was just a second version of that other one. And I think what I did is I may have just pulled out some of the images that were giving characteristics that I wasn't quite feeling I wanted. So let's just generate some images from here and just see it's pretty similar to the previous one. All right, in this one, I must have chosen a different generator type because the images are definitely darker, and I think that's probably a characteristic of that. Some of these are pretty scary. With that, these still weren't giving me quite the results I was looking for. These are pretty good results and what could be useful in different purposes, but I want to give another try to go in a different direction. For the next attempt, I was taking a look at some of the different versions of Stable Diffusion that exist, and I noticed that there is a now 2.1 version. So I wanted to give that a try and see if I would get different results, and kind of maybe I could try to refine that process a little bit more. With that, I was using Dream Studio a little bit, and it was giving me some pretty good results, but still I wanted to try something a little bit easier so that way I could use my workstation and actually run through that. I have a pretty powerful RTX graphics card, and so I actually chose to go the Hugging Face route and use their API to generate some images. So let's take a look at some of those images that I was able to create, and I'll also show you the prompt that I used in the Hugging Face API of Stable Diffusion. I'll use that inside of Scenario GG, kind of show you the difference of the images that are created between the two different implementations. Back at the generators, here is the generator that I created from the Hugging Face Stable Diffusion API. Here are the images that I created from that Stable Diffusion Hugging Face API. And these are headed more in the direction that I wanted as far as the theme and the feel. But the problem is, you can see here and even there, it was really tough. I created probably over 1,000 images, and these are some of the best ones that I got. It's really tough to get things that are inside the frame. So having that kind of just raw Stable Diffusion model, even though it's through the Hugging Face API, it's still kind of really difficult to get the results that you want. And let's generate some images from there. All right, with that complete, you can see that it carries a lot of what those images were before and replicates those very nicely with some subtle changes to it, or some subtle differences. Like here you can see it has this extra horn, probably inspired by this one, or maybe here. And yeah, here it has 3 horns. It only has 3 of these little, I don't know, those are like back horns or head horns. This one has 4. So Scenario GG, once I even had that existing kind of Stable Diffusion images created, it allows me to create a lot of different variations. Now, it's staying pretty close to the ones that I gave it because I only gave it 6 images, I believe, 5 or 6. And when you do that, it's going to stick real closely to the ones that you have. When you provide it many more, then it's going to start to go into a little bit more creative directions with it, but it'll still kind of create pretty close to those different patterns that you have. Now that you can see that, I want to go into Scenario GG and show on the Stable Diffusion 1.5 generator that they have, what kind of style you get when I use the exact same prompts that I used on the Hugging Face API for Stable Diffusion 2.1. I'm going to go over to Generate Images. Go to Public Generators, Stable Diffusion, clear those images out. So this is the exact prompt that I used. You can pause your video right here, so that way you can copy over if you want to try this on your own. And then I'm going to put in the exact negative prompt that I used. On that one I also used the sampling steps of 50 and left the guidance at default, which is close. On the Hugging Face API, I believe it's 7.5 versus 7, but otherwise that's about it. And let's create some images from there. And then I realized I forgot to change the sampling steps to 75, so we'll run that one more time. With that complete, you can see we have some pretty high quality images, as that were sort of close to what the other Stable Diffusion Hugging Face API was giving. But there is definitely a different characteristic to it, not quite the look that I was looking for. But what this service provides that's really nice is in here I have 1, 2, maybe even 2, 3 images that are already somewhat usable, and that's because they're kind of centered and in the frame. When I was using the Hugging Face API, I wasn't able to get many images that had that. Most of the images were very out of frame, kind of like this, but sometimes even worse, and there's a lot more distortion. So this tool, if you can kind of get the look that you want, I recommend using Scenario GG to create it. It's also much faster to be able to just click this button and generate images. From there, I'm going to jump back real quick and just show you, I created another generator from the Hugging Face API Stable Diffusion 2.1, and I found just one other image. And so here I really only have these two images, and then I did a flip to generate the 6 that I needed. And if I generate these are going to be very locked in to being very close to the same. So I'll run that. You can see, because I have so few examples, that it really locks it in pretty close, but there are some subtle differences. So for instance here, yellow eye, green eye, green eye. Same with down here. This one has a red eye, this one has a yellow eye. So they do have variations, but it's real locked in, which is really kind of nice, because once you get some shape that you want, you can just keep leveraging that. Now, a difficulty that exists with that is, for instance, this one here is probably pretty close to what I want, but it only shows 3 legs instead of the 4th. And getting that 4th one is going to be quite challenging. I may go back to Stable Diffusion and try to make a change there. Oh, interesting. Here you can see also that this Behemoth type horn is actually showing up on this one. So kind of that same pattern. So pretty cool. Very consistent, but they also share across each other. Oh, and here too, this one kind of picked up the coloring from this previous one. So real nice. So those are the results of me working on getting the Behemoth look. I didn't get quite what I was hoping to target, but I got some interesting results and also some pretty good looking monsters that I think would be usable. Some lessons learned that I got through this experience. So I think this is much more advanced than I anticipated. In my previous video, I made Magic the Gathering style mountains, and then I also made zoom backgrounds. And I think I really lucked out on that one, because those are much simpler than trying to create a fantasy creature. And so if you are struggling, I recommend maybe starting with something a little bit more simple like that. Some of the reasons why I think this may have been more challenging is each of these are trained on square images. And so a lot of the training data probably was on wider images. The Behemoth creature from Final Fantasy series, when it's in that 4-leg configuration, actually it's spread out and it has a longer body. So when those images were created for training the Stable Diffusion model, they took out square chunks from those long images. So that's probably why a lot of that is you either have the tail of the creature cut off or you have the head of the creature cut off, depending on where those were placed. Outside of the longer body, this is also a creature that is a quadruped, so it has 4 legs instead of a biped that has 2 legs. And now I didn't think that would be a big problem because, 4 it should look similar to 2, but then you actually have twice the area or twice the number to make mistakes on. So it might have been easier to actually choose something that only had 2 legs from that as well. With that square image space, it's tough to have a long 4-legged creature orient in that correctly in order so that way you can tell that it is that long. I'll go back to the generator in the training set that I was actually able to capture that, and I'll show you some of the angles and some of the things that start to go wrong with that. I'm going to go back to the generator that I thought captured the length of the Behemoth creature a little bit better than the rest. And in here, you can see in order to get that length, it has to have the creature at an angle. If a creature is straight faced on, you won't be able to see its body. And if it's completely to the side, it's going to have to cut off either the back end or the front end. Or if we take a look at the previous image, here's one where it kind of captures a side profile of it, but it has to be a little bit smaller because it needs to kind of zoom out from that image a little bit more. So you lose some of the detail in order to try to capture that. If we go back to the other one, what also works, or what starts to happen in these, I've noticed, is that because these parts, these legs, are farther back from the front half, is you start to pick up this mist. Now there may be a way to avoid that, but what it's trying to do is, when there was a background here, is that was showing more depth of that. These are going to be a little bit clearer to see, and these are going to be a little bit fuzzier. But the problem is, if you try to create multiple versions out of the results of this, these really start to wash away even more. I think another part that I didn't think about when I was going to encounter issues with this is I am trying to recreate a fictional creature that has many variations to it. So even throughout the Final Fantasy series, there were different versions of this creature. So trying to get it to hone in on the one that I wanted was very challenging, and probably would be something that I wouldn't approach again in that direction. From those experiences, what I've learned is try to use a subject that's going to fit into a square kind of frame a little bit better than something that's long like that. Try to pick a reduced number of parts. So a two-legged creature is going to be easier than a four-legged creature, and things of that nature. Also, probably want to start with some things that have more examples and less varieties out there than like the Behemoth did. And I think from those, it'll be a lot easier to get success. If you take a look at my mountains and zoom backgrounds from the previous video, you can see there are definitely easier use cases, and I think maybe focusing on this one was pretty challenging. Another thing I want to show you that may be helpful is in creating your training set for your generator. You may have some images that are pretty close or very close to exactly what you want, but there might be one little like blemish or some sort of feature that you don't want in your training data set, and you don't want that to show up over and over. So I'm going to show you quickly how to use GNU Image Manipulation Program to actually remove some of those features, and it's pretty quick, and I think it works pretty well. So let's take a look. All right, so I have GNU Image Manipulation Program. This is open source and free. So download that, install it, and then I'm going to open up one of the images and show you an example of how I would correct that image to make it a little bit better for my training set. With this image, so this is one that I did use in my training set, and I actually didn't do this approach, but I should have. But some of the things, so there is this piece that I don't want to be a part of that. And it looks like there's these little parts here, and maybe this additional tail and that tail. So even though that was generated on the image, we can remove that from the training set. So let's zoom in to the photo. When I'm zoomed in, then I want to go and grab this color picker, and I'm going to choose this section. Make sure you get the background set. So I'm going to do the alternate and color pick. Then I'm going to go to eraser and make sure that my image, my eraser size is appropriate for what I want. Looks about right. And it looks about right. So then what I want to do is start to come in here and color that out. I'll go until about the color change, and then I'll grab this other pick. And let's see, let's grab down here and do the same thing. I'm just going to create these layers and wipe that out. And color pick again. I'll go down to this white and erase that. And then just want to clean this one up at the top here. There we go. So now that I have that feature removed, I can go down here and do the same on this section. Grab that color and just remove that. It's pretty easy on those things that are sticking out that you can just delete those features. When that feature is within the actual subject that you want, you're not going to be able to do this technique, but when it's just outside of it, it works pretty well. And then let's go over here. And we'll delete this extra tail. All right, and then I'll zoom back out. So now we have those features gone. There is some blemishes here, but what I would do is then use the Scenario GG background removal in order to remove that, and so it wouldn't even matter, and now it's going to cut out nicely right around the silhouette of the subject that I want. One of the things you might be thinking to yourself is if the subject or the item that you want to have is a little bit longer, so it's not a square, but you'd actually need that like rectangular, that width, you could just change the size of the generator to actually generate the image in a wide size. The downside of this is actually what's happening is the image generator is still focused on just having a square, but it's going to effectively try to tile that image to create more of it. Now, again, back to kind of the mountains and the zoom background, this kind of works because you can kind of tile those images. So if you have two different types of mountains, the generator can kind of blend those mountains together so it looks like they're together. Same with the zoom background, it'll actually just kind of create more windows or create more of the room and kind of merge those together, and it works pretty well. But I'll show you what happens when you try to use that when you have like one subject, in this case, the Behemoth. Back at Scenario GG, I'm just going to show you on this generator. So I'm going to go down and actually change these dimensions to be wide. And this is a pretty cool advance that they made to the tool. So you can see it's going to actually give you an example of whether it's going to be tall or if it's going to be wide. So that's really helpful. And I'll just generate some images of that. With that complete, you can see exactly what I'm talking about, where it's more of like it tried to tile in a second version of that, and then it tries to blend those together. What happens in some cases is it actually generates a second one, but you still end up with a clipped off end and a clipped off other end. Or sometimes you get this even creepier version of like the centipede effect, which is maybe something that you're looking for in your art, but in this case I was not. So it doesn't work quite the way that you would hope it would. I've seen Scenario GG evolve already a few times in some of the features, and it's getting even easier to use and more exciting. The generation speed for images is really fast. If you get access to it, the initial run on the generator takes a little bit of time, but subsequent runs go very quickly. And even when I was running the Stable Diffusion Hugging Face 2.1 on my own workstation, it takes about 13 seconds to produce one image. And like I said, the images aren't near the kind of usable quality that Scenario GG creates. So even with that, it takes much longer to get a usable result. At the time of recording this video, Scenario GG is in alpha. And so if you want to get access to it, you need to register your email address with Scenario GG. So you go to scenario.gg and put in your email. And then if you get selected, you'll get access. I do recommend you go and register your email address. You may not get into the alpha, but there will be probably other testing stages in the near future, and or you'll at least be notified when the product is generally available. So definitely go and do that so that way you can get access to this cool tool once it's ready. If you liked this video or found it helpful, please give me a thumbs up. If you haven't already, click that subscribe button if you'd like to see more videos like this in the future. Follow me on Twitter for any updates, as well as to participate in polls that I create. The link is in the description below. I'll see you in the next one, and thanks for watching.